Hello and welcome to this episode of the Brain Train channel. Before I move on to the recording with our guest on this episode, I would be very grateful if you can firstly, number one, subscribe. That helps alert you to new content when it's released. Two, like the video. I've been reliably informed by YouTubers that liking videos helps with algorithms, whatever that means, and ultimately can get this helpful content pushed out there and get the information out to others who may find this helpful or are affected by acquired brain injury. So I appreciate everyone you watch on YouTube says that, but I can say on this occasion it is obviously for good, charitable and educational reasons. So at the end of each episode, I will have a signpost to other pods, vlogs and websites and contents from around the brain injury world, which you can access and hopefully gain more from. So without further ado, I hope you find this episode helpful and informative, and please do leave comments and feedback in the box below. Hello everyone, welcome to today's episode. I'm very pleased and honoured to introduce Cathy Johnson. Cathy is an experienced brain injury case manager and the co-founder and director of Rehab Without Walls, which she set up with her husband, Dr. Neil Brooks, a renowned neuropsychologist. Rehab Without Walls is an industry leader in the field of case management, driven by the passion and will of Cathy and Neil, of course. And Cathy is here today to explain a little bit about what case management is in the context of brain injury rehabilitation, and what role a case manager can play when supporting the injured individual on their journey. So without further ado, let's say hello to Cathy.
Hello, Ewan. Nice to see you.
Yes, good. Yes, I'm really, really pleased that you're on. As sort of noted in the intro there, I think you can really, shed some light on case management, particularly to those people who are sort of new to this, don't have a clue what case manager means. I'll admit, when I first started doing my job as solicitor in the sort of field of brain injury, I remember my old line manager saying to me, "Do you know what a case manager is?" And I went, "Huh? What? Case manager?" Because it sounds quite a generic term, but it's such a crucial role in brain injury rehab, in knitting everything together. And Cathy, that's why you're on today, to sort of explain to people how vital they are and how important you can be in helping people along their rehab journey. So why don't we start with you building upon my introduction and providing viewers with some further details to basically where you started out in your working life and how you got on to becoming a case manager.
Okay, we're going to have to go back a long time, probably before you were born.
Yeah.
Back to 1984, when I moved up to Scotland and got a job in the neurosurgical unit called the Institute of Neurological Sciences in Glasgow. And I'd not worked with brain injury. I was a social worker who'd worked in mental health and learning disability. And this was brand new to me. So I wandered into the into the institute, as we used to call it, and had to start from scratch learning about brain injury. And I started initially by being inveigled into running a headway group. I saw up to 600, or probably more than 600 people a year who had brain injuries coming through the unit. And nothing was ever as important again. I'd got the bug, as we used to call it. Brain injury became my life. I met somebody called Neil Brooks, who later became my husband, because he was the only person who really I could contact and speak to about the issues and problems. There was no literature. This was 1984. There was very little that I could access as a social worker, or very little information about how people were managed in the community. And there was a lot of information about brain injury and what the problems were, but nothing about how you got people out into the community and how you got them functioning. And in Scotland, there was no rehabilitation on the West Coast at all. So you got, you got sorted out in the institute, and then you got discharged back into the community. And as a social worker, I found that really difficult to cope with. And of course, my patients that I was seeing would come back and see me in Headway. So I was finding out exactly what the problems were that they were having to deal with on a day-by-day basis in the community, because there was no follow-up. So we started an organisation called the Head Injuries Trust for Scotland.
Right.
And we used that to build up publicity and to get money to provide services. And I ran a clinic in Scotland, in Glasgow, for people who had brain injury. And I put a small ad in the local papers. And we had people from Cumbria travelling up to Glasgow to see me in the clinic.
Wow.
Because there was no services, there was nowhere for anybody to go to. And what I used to do is I'd get one of the consultants that I worked with to come and run the clinic with me every Thursday night. And they would see whoever happened to turn up. And it worked very, very well. So we had the Head Injuries Trust, we had Headway. And one of the entrepreneurs in Glasgow then realised that this was possibly a service that could be developed in terms of rehabilitation. And he decided to build a rehabilitation unit in a place called Bonkle, which was a very unfortunate name. I managed to get the deputy director's job, because that was then going to be me running rehabilitation, which was what I wanted to do. I'd won a scholarship with social work to go and see rehab units down in the south of England. So I knew what could be done. And we set up and ran Scott Care, which is what it was called, for 2 years. And then I got headhunted to run the Kemsley unit in Northampton, where I set up case management, because Neil Brooks had come over. He'd been doing a lot of consulting in America, and in the States they were using case management to coordinate and manage services for a whole group of medical problems. And he saw this as being a sort of a really good way forward to manage brain injury and to get rehabilitation back into the community and get people rehabilitated. So I wanted to case manage. And in 1995, I left the Kemsley unit. And with Neil, we set up Rehab Without Walls. As a bit of I remember going into my accountants and saying, if I could just earn £35,000 a year, then I would be okay. I'd be quite happy. That's all I want to do. I got 25 referrals in the first month.
Wow. Yeah.
And it sort of grew from there. We set up an we'd already been meeting about case management, and we developed a sort of a case management working group. So I'd been over to America and I'd seen what was happening over there. And we were at that point in time setting up the British Association of Brain Injury Case Managers. So I was one of the founder members on the steering group of that. So it all came together in 95, 96, when we founded Babicum as well, with Neil as the chair. And we set up the whole structure, which has moved everything forward. And Babicum is now 25 years old, as well as Rehab Without Walls. So, wow. Yeah, that's where I started.
That's quite a story. I think what resonated with me about that journey there was what appeared to be the lack of cohesion between sort of medical hospital settings and community, because obviously you identified a massive gap there in terms of cohesion between the two. When you're setting up these clinics, and I mean, for young bucks like me, and there's meant to be this better sort of system. I'm still finding that there are issues between that, like I say, that synergy between community and clinical. But in given your journey, would you say things have improved and got better? Obviously, it sounds like it has from where it started. So I think that's probably an obvious question, but
well, there's people doing what we set out to do. I mean, I don't know how many case managers or brain injury case managers there are in the UK. I suspect it's probably 1.5 to 2,000. So it's not a big number. Bearing in mind that we have a brain injured population of I don't know, 300,000 or 400,000. And the population just gets bigger as years go by. So it's a big problem. There is more acceptance of the fact that there is case management, but I don't think that it's universal, shall I say, across the UK. I think some places are more au fait with case management. They know more about what's happening. They have more links with people who are case managers, but there's some NHS resources that you walk into and it's as if you're the enemy. And they're very, very wary of what you're going to do. They won't talk to you. They won't give you any information. You're out to see the client, but that's about it. So I think that there are still problems in terms of the interface between the NHS and independent case management and independent services. There's a lovely vignette, and I know we're not supposed to say anything about the NHS at the moment, but I do remember having a client in Essex and ringing up as her neuropsychologist in the Essex service, and her basically telling me that she didn't approve of what we were doing because she was in for the long haul. And this must be 15 years ago.
Right.
She then went off on maternity leave 3 times in the next 4 years, so wasn't available, and then went off sick. We're still managing that client. So we've been in it for the long haul, and the services that she should have been able to rely on in the NHS just disappeared. We've never been able to resurrect them. So the independent services have been the only consistent and long-lived service that this particular lady's had.
Yeah.
So that we have become I suppose the reliable support system for a huge group of brain injured people that have access to the funds. And you've got to remember that we're working in the independent sector and most case managers are funded through compensation. So I would anticipate that we're probably only dealing with 35% of the population of head injury.
Wow. Yeah.
So, if you think about that, but for that particular group, we can be the most consistent service provider through the rest of their lives. And some of our clients, we've had for 20 years. It's something that is really very, it's difficult to believe, but we do provide that level of input.
Yeah, I think certainly I want to come back onto the, as you say, the sort of interface between NHS and the independent services. And
you're going to get me into lots of trouble.
No. I think even from my brief experience, I've seen it work quite well, where the NHS are sort of willing. I've even sat in sort of MDT meetings in hospitals, and there's been coordination, collaboration between NHS therapists and private therapists funded for a personal injury claim. And on that particular case, it worked really well. But I'd say that there's either that sort of that hesitancy, that reluctance to sort of, I don't think, from the independent services like you, probably more from the NHS, and how we sort of bridge that gap is obviously something we'll talk about a little bit later. But I think what you were sort of touching upon in terms of the value that you provide as an industry, and how you can provide that consistent input and support, probably leads on to the next question, which is, and you've already touched upon it a little bit, but what is a case manager? It sounds like quite a simple question, and I know there will be a very long answer.
Maybe let me give you the Babicum definition first, if I can find it, because I thought I'd look it up this morning, and then I won't be able to find it in my paperwork, of course. But Babicum describes case management as a collaborative process that assesses, plans, implements, coordinates, monitors, and evaluates the interventions and services required to meet an individual's health and well-being, rehabilitation, education, and/or occupational needs, using communication and available resources to promote. Basically, I
think we lost you there for a second.
Sorry,
with the connection, but
do you want me to actually do it again, or?
No, that's all right. I think we just lost you at the very end there, where you finished.
Okay. But to me, the case manager is in that helicopter.
Yeah.
Above the mess that's underneath, with the client and the family and rehabilitation services and education and housing and holidays and transport, and the case manager is guiding the client through that maze and making sure that they get access to the services that they need at the time that they need those services. There's a wonderful, I've sent you a snapshot of a case manager's creed.
Yes,
that is absolutely brilliant, and I've had that on my wall since 1998 to describe what the role of a case manager is. And it just means that we need to know, we either need to know or have the ability to find out about just about anything.
Yeah.
And to actually organize that for the person who's had the injury, because everybody's different. And you try to actually you're putting people back together to make a whole again, where there was damage and where there was an injury. So you're in that helicopter, you're trying to get them to find the way around.
Yeah, I mean,
Annika treasure hunt, which again you're probably too young to remember.
Oh, what's that? Sorry.
The Annika Rice treasure hunt.
No, I remember that. Yeah, I'd have been quite little, but yeah, I remember programs. No, I think you used quite a good analogy earlier about jigsaws, and I suppose you've got that sort of holistic view of things. You mentioned the helicopter there. I can just imagine a helicopter with a winch trying to place this piece in the jigsaw. And,
yeah.
I mean, that's probably some imaginative analogy there, but I think that probably aptly describes what you do. But I think from what I've seen, it's another really important aspect is obviously coordinating the therapeutic effort, because in a brain injury case, you can have neuropsychologists, OTs, physiotherapists, neurophysios, amongst speech and language, just
neuropsychiatry,
psychiatry, just to name a few. There's
cosmetic surgery, yeah,
all sorts. So obviously, in your role, you've got to try and make sure that whilst they've got differing specific objectives, that they come together for an overall goal for the client, and it's making sure that that they're continuing on a forward path. And I think the good case managers out there can, like you say, look at everything holistically and bring it all together, to align with one another. And I think that's what you've essentially said there. So maybe moving on to my next question, on the theme of that, is how and why are case managers important in the context of brain injury rehab? So you've already said how you bring it all together,
Well, let me just go back to the first early days of case management, because there was research into case management funded by the King's Fund, and there was no funding available at that point in time through compensation money. This is going back to 1989, 1990.
Mm.
And the research was set up so that the case manager would be able to coordinate, was there to coordinate services. And it was based in London, and the initial case manager was a lady called Janice Price. And she managed to get the people, the client, the patients that she saw, to all the services, all the speech and language therapy, the OT, the physio, the neuropsychology. But because of the limitations of the services themselves within the NHS, so you were allowed to have, say, 6 sessions of physio or 12 sessions of OT, or you saw a neuropsychologist, you were put on the waiting list and you had to see it. She was able to get people to them, but she wasn't able to get the rehabilitation managed on a long-term basis, because they then fell out of that system.
Mm.
Whereas what we do as case managers at the moment is that we can make sure that people get the rehabilitation that they need for as long as they need it, in a coordinated way, so everybody works that way, and it's done from their own home.
Yeah.
So that when they learn how to cook, they learn how to cook in their own kitchen rather than in the OT kitchen in a hospital. So they know where everything is, or they knew, they were familiar with it before they had the injury, or they will know where everything is if they've had to move house. And similarly, they'll know they were using the bathroom, so they'll know what the problems are of the bathroom and the issues there. So the rehabilitation is taken to the individual rather than them having to go to places for that rehabilitation. And it can then be coordinated so that you can have, if you need to have physio working together with OT, you can actually have them both working together at that particular point in time in the person's home. So it means that there's a coordination that was never available before.
Yeah.
And certainly wasn't available in people's houses before. You had to travel to the hospital to go and have your rehabilitation. They didn't come out to you.
Yeah.
It's a totally different thing. When I first started case managing, I was ringing around to find private physios that knew nothing about brain injury, but we were trying to actually get individuals around. So case management has not only changed the world for case management, it's also changed the world of therapy. So there are now more therapists working independently in the community than there ever have been.
So it certainly expanded and extended the reach of the brain injury field, really, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think? Well, what do you think the core ingredients are for a good case manager in brain injury? I mean, again, you've touched upon it already, but maybe sort of put it together in one neat little package of a response.
Yeah, I mean, one, they've got to communicate. They've got to be able to communicate not only with the person who's got the brain injury, but the person's their family. They've got to be able to communicate with the solicitors and any therapists that are involved. And they've got to be able to do that not only verbally, but in writing, because if it's verbal, you're never going to be able to use it in court. It's got to be able to be written down and presented in a way that you've got to be able to use it. They've got to be able to plan and organize things. They've got to juggle to be able to put things together, to prioritize and make sure that things happen when they should happen, and decide which area needs to take priority over the other. They've got to act as an advocate for the client. And I've actually made a note, they've got to hustle.
I like
They've got
that.
to be able to hustle.
Yeah.
You've got to, a lot of the time you're ringing round trying to get things to happen. You've got to find the services. You've got to speak to people who don't want to talk to you. You're ringing the benefits office, or you're talking to the local NHS, or you're hustling all the time to try and get things going and moving things forward. So you've got to be a hustler and persuasive, and you can't be a shrinking violet. You've got to be able to present yourself, and to a certain extent you've got to be larger than life, in order to get things going, and you've got to be committed to this particular group. If you're not interested, you're not going to last. People, we talk about people who work as case managers with brain injuries getting the bug, because it is, that's it. You get the bug and you can't work with anything else.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that. Obviously, I'm a brain injury solicitor, and I kind of fell into doing this field of work, if I'm being brutally honest. There was obviously an opportunity at my old firm doing a paralegal role before I did my training contract. And then, you just see how, well, obviously it's that personable and traumatic element of it, and then seeing them on that road to recovery. And like you said, it is a bit of a bug. You do get a kick out of seeing people improving their lives, and from what could be, well, it does shatter their lives at that moment in time. But with the right network of people around them, be it from the legal side, from the therapeutic side, whatever, it's an incredible journey. That's why I'm still here doing what I'm doing. And so, yeah, I think that the bug's the right way of describing it. And I never thought I would hear a case manager refer to themselves as a hustler, which is a great way of putting it, I think, because you do need to hustle. I think, for anyone watching, the main thing is having, really passionate, driven, strong-willed case manager who loves what they do, thrives in what they do. And, if you as the individual who's injured and a family align with that, there's no doubt you will make some strides in your recovery. I think that the next thing I wanted to ask you about, which will probably be in people's minds, is what should they ask when approaching a case manager to ensure they're going with the right individual? Now, normally, what would sort of happen in a personal injury claim, when we have a brain injured client, we would sort of recommend and say, that we know these sort of case managers are very good. Have a look at them. Obviously, they have to agree to it, and obviously have some sort of initial chat with them to see if they're the right fit. But if someone had sort of specific questions as to what they should be looking for, maybe in terms of their experience and background, what would you suggest they ask?
Right, they want to know what the case manager's qualifications and experience are.
Yeah.
You need somebody who is a grown-up in terms of their career, I suppose. You don't want somebody who's newly qualified, just out of uni and just starting to practice. You want someone who has some experience of working in their clinical career, and then I would actually say you want somebody with experience of working with brain injury, but that's more difficult to achieve nowadays. We used to be able to do it relatively easily because there were so few of us. But you want to ask about qualifications and background and where they've worked, who they've worked with, what they've done. They need to ask if the case manager has experience of working with someone who's had a brain injury, and whether that experience has been in the community. Because if you've got someone who's worked in a rehabilitation unit, that's a different way of working to working in somebody's house in the community. Yeah. It's a, it's a different mindset. You want to know how long they've been a case manager. And on top of that, you want to know how many clients they've managed, or how many people they've managed, because you can have case managers who work full-time and therefore have a full caseload and are managing 12, 13 clients at a time. Or you might have a case manager who's working as an OT in the NHS and working as a case manager 1 or 2 days a week. So the experience that they get and the experience of working with brain injury is different in terms of time, so that they won't have as many cases. You want to know how they're going to keep in contact with you, and whether that's by email.
There's nothing wrong with email. It's
Nothing wrong with email.
When it's all of it email.
Or whether they're going to visit and how often they're going to visit, and whether they can use Zoom, which we've all had to learn to do over the last 18 months or so, and how often, because I think people do want to know what the case manager's doing, and they want to know, if they've had a meeting once a month, they don't want the case manager to come back, I met you in July. They don't want you to come back a month later in August and say, well, I haven't been able to do that because or I've just managed to do that. They want to sort of see results more quickly. And from my view, I would want to know how they are supported, because I feel that if you're doing this in the community as you're working the case manager in the community, it's a very lonely job. You've moved out of the NHS or out of social services, and you're on your own, and you're having to do things that you think are right. It's very good to be able to talk it over with someone, or to discuss what your worries are or your plans are, and make sure that you're on the right lines. So it's whether they're supported, and how they get that support. And also, if they go on holiday or off sick, is there anybody to pick up the work?
Yeah.
To actually, catch things that might be happening if they're away. And this might be the last one, but that's not necessarily in terms of importance. It's, are they a member of a professional organisation such as Babicum? Because that then shows that you've got an interest in the career. You've got an interest in what's happening. That gives you access to training. It gives you access to support. And if they're an advanced member of Babicum, which means that you've actually made the effort to go in front of two of your peers and be assessed in terms of whether you're a good case manager or not.
Yeah.
So I think that's that's really quite a difficult thing for a lot of people to do, to have that peer assessment. So having advanced membership of Babicum is really quite something. I remember doing it myself. I think I was the 6th person to do it.
Wow.
And Neil was the first person to be tested. He was the first person to be interviewed for advanced membership. I mean, he never took it up, but we tried it out on him.
He was the guinea pig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that. But there's also, it's not just questions. It's things like, do you like the case manager? Do you trust them? Do they understand you? And do they know what's important to you? Are they getting you as an individual? Because I presume what you're looking at is a case manager having a beauty parade.
Yeah.
You're looking at meeting the case manager, not just accepting the solicitor's choice. I could go into that one, but I won't. And can you understand what the case manager is actually saying?
Yeah.
Are they using too many big words and too many jargon words that they've taken from their clinical training? Are they speaking to you in a way that you can understand what they're saying? And can you work with them? Can you actually work with them in the future? And I think that's because I think people do accept, the solicitor makes a recommendation, and eventually they'll turn around and say, well, I didn't want them anyway. I didn't.
Yeah.
So I think it is important that they get the opportunity to ask those questions and to think about that, and to know that they don't have to take the one that's chosen.
Yeah,
they
no,
don't they don't
absolutely.
have to
Yeah,
they don't have to have the case manager that their solicitor recommends. They can pick the one that they want. And it's their choice, because the case manager has got to put them first.
yeah,
And they've got to be happy working with them, otherwise it's not going to work.
absolutely. I think that's what Mark and I tried to do. We suggest a few, but the message should always be, you are the central person.
Yeah.
Within all that, this is what's driving everything, you, and getting you better. So, if something doesn't quite work for you, be it a case manager or a therapist, you've got to speak up and say so, and make changes where you think it's going to be necessary to achieve what you need to achieve. So yeah, absolutely on that. One thing I wanted to sort of ask, a couple of things actually. You mentioned about asking about what happens if the case manager goes on holiday or is off sick, which can happen. I think some case management companies obviously have assistant case managers and things like that, don't they, which can work effectively. So what, in terms of an assistant case manager, my understanding is that they necessarily, well, some of them don't necessarily have the clinical background that you'd expect of a case manager, but that sort of come through the ranks of a company. Is that right? Or am I? So, I mean, some do have the background.
I think it varies. I think each case management company seems to have built its system independently, and they have their own way of working. We've got an assistant case manager up in Manchester, and she worked with us closely as a team leader for a lot of our care packages. So we've employed her as an assistant case manager, and she manages the care packages for the case manager to save money. It costs less for her to do that, and it's actually more effective because she can actually work specifically with them. I think sometimes it is people who are interested in case management but haven't got a clinical qualification. Sometimes it may be a stepping stone to being a case manager, but you just need to get the experience of doing it. So it depends. You know about the Babicom competency levels?
Yeah, no, I've sat on some webinars recently. There's a whole host of things going off with Babicom and getting regulated and things of that nature. So there's an awful lot of work going on there. I think it was Angela Kerr who did or was on this webinar, and she was sort of explaining what they're doing. Maybe sort of expand upon that for my sake and for you.
Well, the big ambition that we've had, because we're a young profession, if you think about it, we only really started in the early 1990s.
I'll not say how old I am and in relation to the industry, but yeah.
But we basically the aim has been for case management to become a profession, recognized profession, like nursing, like OT, like physiotherapy, and to actually gain recognition for that. So Babicom has been working on that for a long time, and we've joined forces with CMS UK and with VRA, which is a vocational rehabilitation services, to actually work to set up an institute of registration for case management, which is, now I'll have to check my notes. It's part of it'll be registered by the Professional Standards Authority, and will serve to register case managers. So there'll be another way of recognizing who a good case manager would be, and where if somebody's okay, because they're going to have to go through a registration process. And that's been something we've been working towards over the last 20 years. And we set up I was chair of Babicum 2007 to 2010, and set up the process of doing of competencies for case managers, what you should be doing at certain stages of your career. And we also set up a code of ethics for case management at that time, which has now been rewritten. And we've got standards for case management as well. So the whole thing will come together in the Institute of Registered Case Managers, which should have been launched last year, but has been delayed as a result of COVID.
Yeah. Well, it's great that that's all coming together. But I think you spoke quite well about what people should look for in a case manager. You mentioned about Babicum, being the sort of body, if you like, and they set out the core competencies, and people can be accredited with them. So they're the sort of watermarks people need to look for, don't they, in regards to good case management. Well, why don't we sort of finish up with maybe talking about your particular highlights as a brain injury case manager? I was looking on Rehab Without Walls website earlier, and there's all sorts of positive stories about how you've helped people along the way, but maybe if you can mention one or two that spring to your mind.
Let me give you one of the stories that I think changed the world. And in 1997 we had a conference with Babicum, which I think was an interesting one, and we had the new master of the Court of Protection, who subsequently became senior judge, Denzel Lush, speaking to us about the role of the Court of Protection. And as I said, case managers tend to be quite outspoken, and they're not shrinking violets. So he got barracked at this conference about how the compensation, the financial receivers, as they were at that point in time, were usually members of the family, who were put in an invidious position where they were trying to actually care for somebody with a brain injury whilst also managing their money. And that often caused all sorts of behavioural difficulties and falls out in families. And we put forward, I was asked to write a paper, and I did so with one of my colleagues, Jackie Turnbull, about the role of receivership. And Denzel Lush took this on as a very serious thing, and began to recommend that receivers were solicitors. And at that point in time, I think there were only one or two people doing receivership. But we changed the whole role of receivership. It moved from families doing receivership in the Court of Protection to, the whole new financial deputy situation. I feel quite proud that that's one of the things that we did. There's another one which I won't call a highlight, but I actually did a lot of work with child abused children at one point, and actually being able to work with them and seeing the results of what happened as they went through the stages after they'd been badly brain damaged as children, and looking at how they were cared for and managed as they grew up. And one of the other things I do is expert witness work, as you know. And one of my expert witness cases is going to be in the Paralympics next week. So
wow.
I'm really chuffed a bit.
Wow. That's incredible.
I'll be sitting on my sofa cheering her on.
Yeah.
And that's really some of the things that you can actually see, that some of the work that you've done years down the line has made a total and tremendous difference to people's lives. But the other thing is being satisfied that some of the people we work with, we've actually managed for so long, that they are cases that are clients that we've basically been part of their lives and part of their family for 20 years or so, and been involved in what they've been doing for that length of time. And that's a really good thing for us to do and to be able to manage as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really nice way to end it, I think, Cathy. Just so you mentioned about financial deputies, I'll probably cover that up in another episode, because the court protection is a whole big topic in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks again, Cathy, and really appreciate your time today.
No problem. Enjoyed it, I think. I hope.
You've done a sterling job. Thanks very much, Cathy.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.